to infinity and beyond!
This is me. This is how I win.
Were you rushing or were you dragging? Answer!
You're a wizard, Harry.
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you.
No. I am your father.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
And here we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back inside the film room. Zach Goins here with Johnny Sobchak for our action-packed 150th episode. What a time to be alive. What a time to be an Inside the Film Room listener, Johnny.
I am very excited, very proud that we have reached this milestone. We had a good episode on tap as well, so it won't be a boring affair by any means. But
hey, they never are. They never are. Don't even put that out there.
They never are. But 150, yeah, I'm excited. And I mean, I've been doing this. I've been co-hosting for over 2 years at this point. So
I just pulled it up. I was thinking about it. 79 was your debut as the co-host. So
hey.
We're almost to the point. You've almost eclipsed Jake as being on more episodes than he was. Wow, what a time.
Awesome.
So we'll have this is our 150th celebration, and then at I guess 158 we'll have another celebration as you taking over for the permanent co-host. But yeah, like you said, great episode today. A lot of fun stuff that we're going to talk about. We've got our news from the week, a couple big items and some shifting release dates, and then talking about a fantastic episode of House of the Dragon, episode 8, recapping that, talking about what to expect here in the final 2 episodes of the season. And for our review today, we are talking about Smile. I know that's from a couple weeks ago at this point, but one that Johnny and I just recently caught up with. Figured it was good enough to talk about and fitting enough to still, it's spooky season. We can throw it back a couple weeks to get a good horror movie on the podcast. So a lot of fun in that movie and a lot of fun that we're going to have discussing it. So going to be a great one. But before we dive into any of that, be sure to subscribe to the Rewind newsletter so you can get everything sent to your inbox, all of our articles, posts on the website, podcasts, giveaways, all of that fun stuff sent directly to you. Make sure you sign up. You can find that on our website, on our social media channels at Inside Film Room. But now that that's out of the way, Johnny, what's been going on with you lately? What's going on in the world? What you've been watching? How's everything going?
Yeah, it's been going pretty well, pretty low key as of late, I would say. There's been not like a downturn in new releases, but I've been kind of not at the theater as much lately, I would say. And I haven't been watching like a ton of TV. I've been kind of getting busier with work. So, but I am trying to keep up with spooky season, trying to stay in theme.
Mm-hmm.
And so as far as what I've been watching, on the television side, my girlfriend and I, we finally got around to starting Midnight Mass, which was Michael Flanagan's Netflix series that came out last October.
Oh yeah.
And we are 4 episodes in as of now. I believe there's 10 total. And we are really liking it. We are very much fans of this. Definitely like it more than Bly Manor, which we enjoyed to some degree. I was very mixed on it though. And we loved The Haunting of Hill House. So we'll see if this ends up on that tier of Hill House or even surpassing it. I think it definitely has potential. But yeah, really liking it so far. You did see that last year.
Yes, right? I watched that last year in real time, like when it was released. Really, really liked it. I've seen all of the other shows as well that you were referencing. And I definitely liked Bly Manor more than you did, but I think that I think my ranking of those 3 is Hill House, Midnight Mass, Bly Manor.
Okay.
But big fans of of all three. But it's funny you mentioned that because I started literally last night. I did not make much progress, but I started last night the Midnight Club, which is his show for this year. His spooky season show this year. We made it about 30 minutes in before Rebecca passed out on the couch, so I had to press pause, and we'll pick back up with that tonight, maybe or later this week. But it's October is Mike Flanagan's season on Netflix.
Absolutely. He's our golden boy, the spooky golden boy. What did you think of the first 30 minutes or so?
I was intrigued. It's cool to see, you know, all of these are like based on some form of like literature. Obviously, like I was reading an article that was talking about like why Midnight Mass and why the Midnight Club are not like haunting shows, because, you know, that started off with Hill House, then did Bly Manor, and it seemed like, oh, is this like an American Horror Story type thing? But he was just talking about like how each one, like those two are like more classical not classical as in like Edgar Allan Poe, or like old stuff, but like, you know, like it's weird to say modern classics too, because those are still from like a long time ago. Anyway, they are like less modern storytelling and like focusing on like one work. But anyway, Midnight Club, in the first 30 minutes, I liked the characters, I liked what they were setting up, and there were already some solid spooks and scares going on. So I'm excited to pick back up with that. It's 10 episodes. I knew it was coming, but I didn't even realize that it had released. So I saw someone tweet about it, and I was like, oh, I need to catch up on this. So we'll hopefully get a little binge going here this week or next week to knock it out.
Very good. Yeah, if you I'm not crazy like ready to jump on that, but if you like it or have high regard, I may have to check it out. At least after I finish Midnight Mass. And then as far as the movie side of things, of course, Smile, which we're going to be talking about more in detail later. And then at home, while I was visiting my buddy Clint, we decided to sit down in the spirit of spooky season and watch Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is really Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, his adaptation of that novel. He had the 4K, and I'd never seen the film, and I had heard good things about the 4K, so I was hoping we could check it out. And so he threw it on, and I had mixed feelings about it. It's a very visually stunning movie. That's what it's most famous for, the costumes in particular. Also, it does some really cool things with like optical illusions and like sets and that sort of thing, and paintings. But it has, Keanu Reeves plays the main character. He plays, if you've ever seen Nosferatu, if you're familiar with Dracula, there's this main character named Harker or Hutter in the German film Nosferatu, and he's just like kind of like an everyday guy. And then he has his wife, or like his partner, and she is pretty much like the victim or like the target of Dracula's like love, I guess you could say, his sick love. And so Gary Oldman plays Dracula. And he's very much like over the top, like very crazy and fun and creepy. And Keanu Reeves, he's doing his best to do like a British accent, and it is not very good. In fact, he's just not very good in general, unfortunately. There's also the female lead that is played by Winona Ryder, in her prime, like early 90s. Same with Keanu. And she's good enough. She's, I would say, better than Keanu, but still, I think, like, I don't know if she works necessarily like in that particular kind of movie. But definitely not on the level of like Coppola's, obviously, like the Godfather films or Apocalypse Now. But I'd still say, if you're like interested in like vampire movies or like those horror movies, like period horror movies, worth checking out like at some point. But I'm glad that I was able to see that, because I was very much considering buying, like splurging like a blind buy on the 4K, and I don't think I would really watch it very much. So saved myself some money there. But yeah, I thought it was interesting.
Lovely. I also just watched Smile, and another classic spooky movie. This, as far as my viewing goes. So obviously we'll get into Smile, but I know last week I mentioned the new Hellraiser on Hulu, David Bruckner's version. But I went back after working on that and watching that a couple times. I went back and watched the original Hellraiser, which I had never seen. I know Jake and I believe Josh really enjoyed it, and I saw that you have a 1 star, 1.5 star review of this bad boy from 1987. Um,
Oh man.
but I thought it was very the story is not what I was expecting. But the practical effects and makeup and everything was like obviously different looking back now, but for trying to like look at it for the time in 1987, like that was probably horrifying, and it's all still like holds up pretty well. So that was cool to see like that and compare like what I have just recently seen in this 2022 version with that. But so that was fun. Watched Smile, and then on the TV front, I know I mentioned Midnight Club already. I didn't know where to classify this, but Werewolf
Right.
by Night, the new Marvel special presentation. I didn't know if I should put that as a TV show or a movie or what, because it's 53 minutes. It's its own standalone thing. So we'll just talk about it in the middle of movies and TV. But you have not watched this yet, correct?
I have not. I I've heard good things. I'm not sure. I mean, it's only 53 minutes and not a huge commitment, but hopefully I'll get around to it, but it's not a priority, I would say.
Right. I enjoyed this quite a bit. Quite a bit meaning like 3.5 stars. So it was like
Yeah.
nothing like crazy for me. But I think my biggest thing with this, and I've seen a ton of people say it, so it's nothing like revolutionary or new to be saying. But the most exciting part about this is like the format of it. Like we're not spending 6 hours stretching out a single story across this and basically making a movie into 6 parts, like some like Winter Soldier or Falcon and Winter Soldier was, or we're not like doing just a long extensive TV series that we've seen on Disney Plus. But this is just in and out, almost like the special presentations need to be like an anthology series where they don't even have to connect to anything else. It's just this is supposedly its own standalone thing. So it's like tight, effective storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
It had this 1930s like universal horror classic inspiration is what it was. A lot of people referred to that.
Yeah.
Obviously like not to the scale of that, but things were practical for the most part. It was black and white. The feel was there. So I think that worked really well as far as the style goes. But I thought it was the perfect length, and I'm really excited, and I hope that Marvel takes this feedback, the reception here, and cranks out like multiple versions of these per year rather than thinking that everyone needs a full series or everybody needs a movie or something.
Right.
So that was cool. I think they could do a lot of fun stuff with this format and really kind of liven things up, because this felt completely different from anything that we'd ever gotten from Marvel before. Not just like it felt different than Phase 4 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I know the special, like I believe the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special is also being considered a special presentation. Obviously that has more connections and will lead up to the events of the third movie that's coming out. But like I really like the idea of just like these standalone kind of spin-offs here. But the final TV thing that I watched, which I can't talk in depth about yet because of rules and regulations, but screeners for Mythic Quest season 3 have arrived, and I have watched 2 episodes, and that is all I will say. So that show returns November 11th on Apple TV Plus. Stay tuned for more.
We love to see it.
We do indeed.
In the spirit of spooky season, I guess, getting into the news part of the program, Focus Features must have the spooky vibes strong, because it sounds like they are going ahead with the green light on Robert Eggers. I mentioned Dracula earlier. Francis Ford Coppola did his version, and now Robert Eggers, who of course is known for The Witch and The Lighthouse and The Northman, he's going to be doing his take on Nosferatu and Dracula, which is apparently going to be filming later this year overseas. And we got some casting news as well, Zach. This kind of came out of nowhere. I know there had been rumors or like this was something that has been in development for years. It was like a passion project of his. Seemed like it was never going to happen. He was being very coy about it earlier in the year when he was promoting the Northman. He was like, yeah, we've moved on from that. It's like a, something that maybe we'll come back to later on. But it sounds like, I guess, everything came together and now they're doing it. And the casting news, Zach, go ahead and share with us who is going to be in this bad boy, and what do you think about the casting in particular?
Well, Johnny, the cast here. First up, there have been some changes from what we at one point expected. Because back in the day, there's never confirmation, but the rumor mill was churning, and they said that we were going to have Anya Taylor-Joy as a female lead in this movie and Mr. Harry Styles as the male lead. However, that is not the case. We have an upgrade in one department, a downgrade in the other, and then a vampire enters the mix. Bill Skarsgård, the horror icon from playing Pennywise in It, from, just recently being in, not the horror part, but being in Barbarian, will be playing the vampire. Meanwhile, Lily Rose Depp will be taking over as the female lead and Nicholas Hoult as the male lead. I don't know much about Lily Rose Depp, but I know she's not Anya Taylor-Joy, so that's a bit of a bummer for me. Big fan of her. And she's obviously worked with Eggers quite a bit on The Witch, on The Northman. So that familiarity was obviously an intriguing part here that was like, oh, it's just natural for him to cast her. But instead, we'll get Lily Rose Depp. But Nicholas Hoult, I will say that's an upgrade after what we just saw in Don't Worry, Darling. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I would wager a guess that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I agree with you there. I tweeted about this, that, we finally got this movie, like they are going to green light it and actually make it. But everyone all along has been imagining Anya Taylor-Joy, in this role. And, it's not like it's the female lead. It's not exactly like a glamorous role or like something that could be necessarily iconic. It is like a scream queen, like sort of situation. So she would be kind of a almost peripheral character, but I am glad to see that, as you mentioned, Harry Styles is not going to be in this, because I don't know if he necessarily has the chops to go and do something this kind of heavy. I would expect, as knowing Robert Eggers, this is going to be a pretty intense, pretty dramatic feature. And so I think Nicholas Hoult, also ironic, I just tweeted after I saw Don't Worry, Darling, I said that Nicholas Hoult would have been a great choice for Harry Styles' character in that movie. And I think would have done even better. So I'm glad to see that, maybe the universe is out there knowing that Nicholas Hoult and guys like Aaron Taylor Johnson and whatnot would fit better than Harry Styles probably in most things. So I'm glad to see that his name is attached, and he's just a guy that I feel like he hasn't gotten that one big role. And like, this is not necessarily like a big role. It is, it's going to be, I'm sure, like a rated R, like it's a vampire movie, but he was in talks. Supposedly he was competing with Robert Pattinson to play Batman. He was also going to be a villain in the new Mission Impossible movies that are coming up at one point that had to drop out. And so, yeah, it's nice that he's going to get something that's going to be pretty high profile, pretty artistic, I would say, knowing Eggers and of course, Bill Skarsgård. I mean, he is someone that's kind of a chameleon and can definitely play very spooky, very creepy. And I'm very excited, I think, more than anything, just to see the world that Eggers builds in this, as he always does. He's very true to like certain periods as far as costumes, the sets, the locations, and everything. But of course, Bill Skarsgård, like how they're going to make him into the vampire. I'm imagining we're going to be looking at a pretty impressive like hair and makeup situation, prosthetics and that sort of thing. Could potentially be thinking like awards winning potentially down the road whenever this comes out. So yeah, Lily Rose Depp, we'll see. I'm, again, it's not like the neediest role in the world I'm expecting. I'm sure she can probably hold her own, but definitely not as exciting or necessarily as enticing as Anya Taylor-Joy would have been.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I know you have been high on this for a while, back when we thought it was otherwise. I'm interested to see how I feel about this, because I was kind of I liked the Wish a lot. I enjoyed The Northman quite a bit this year. It was one of my favorites of the year, but it wasn't at all what I was expecting. I think I remember we had that discussion back in when we were reviewing that as to what we thought the movie was going to be versus what it ended up being. But I did not like The Lighthouse whatsoever. So this seems like it'll probably be more in line with The Witch or The Northman, more straightforward rather than The Lighthouse, which is just not a good thing for me at all. But I'm curious to see, what are your thoughts here? How do you think that the Skarsgård connection came up? Do you think that while they were filming Northman, that Alexander was like, hey, you should really get Bill in here for Nosferatu?
Well,
hook your brother up.
What's interesting, now that you mentioned that, I'd completely forgotten about this, but at one point it was reported or said that Bill Skarsgård had a role in The Northman.
Right.
I don't know if that was ever actually true, if like he may have been attached at one point and then fell off, or if he even maybe filmed something or like showed up and then they ended up not using it or doing it. But maybe there was some sort of communications there between Eggers and Bill Skarsgård prior. And then they were just like, well, maybe this isn't going to work for this, but later on when we do Nosferatu, like I think you'd be a great fit, and here we are. So yeah, I think he's a talent, and he's getting a little typecast, I would say, as like creepy guys or like monsters, which is kind of funny. Certainly not a bad thing. But it is going to be another one where he's going to have to transform, and I'm excited to see what that looks like. So and maybe we will see him in like some sort of human version. There, usually in Dracula, not the original Nosferatu, but like in Ford Coppola's film, there was Gary Oldman. He plays this creepy, disgusting, like kind of horrific vampire, but then he also turns into like a human or like a handsome like man. So it's possible we'll see some of that maybe. But yeah, I'm excited, and they're going to be filming this year. Maybe we'll get it late next year. But I'm thinking, as big of a movie, this is probably going to be to turn around everything. Probably a 2024 film would be my guess.
Well, speaking of future films, Johnny, break down this release date roulette that just happened this week. Everything changing places, some moving up, some moving back, some moving who knows where. But I know there's one that's got you just itching, ready to go.
Oh yeah. So the first domino that fell, and this is something we've been keeping on an eye on for a little while now, because Blade, the Marvel Studios film with Mahershala Ali starring in the title role, there was reports that there was issues behind the scenes, issues with the script, the director dropped out, so the search was on, and that was in the last couple of weeks. Now we just got the confirmation yesterday that this is going to be a big fix for them. They're going to have to completely delay this film. And it was basically removed from the schedule, delayed indefinitely. They were supposed to film next month, November, to get it ready for a November 3rd, 2023 release date. And then after we heard yesterday that it was going to be delayed indefinitely, we got a big slew of release date shifting from Disney, especially in the Marvel side of things. And so Blade is going to be delayed almost a full year, going from November 3rd, 23 to September 6th, 2024. And then basically the Marvel films are shifting back to accommodate that. So Deadpool 3 is going to go back a couple months from that September 6th date to November 8th of 2024. Fantastic Four is going to go from that November 8th date to February 14th the following year, 2025, a few months. And then the big one, which a lot of people saw coming, given VFX and production scheduling and all that stuff, Avengers Secret Wars, quite possibly the biggest movie the Marvel Studios will ever do, or at least up to this point. That is going to be delayed from November 7th of 2025 to May 1st, 2026, which is hard to wrap my head around, to be quite frank, but
so far away.
Who knows? But we know that they have a writer attached to that. The screenwriting for that is going to be underway soon, and they still have to figure out, or at least announce, who the director is going to be. So that'll buy them some more time there.
And that does make sense, though, for the biggest movie of all time for Marvel to move from a early November spot to like being the start of summer blockbuster.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That's common sense, I feel like.
Yeah, agreed. And it was going to be a lot of people were, the biggest reason people thought this would be delayed is the crunch of having 2 Avengers movies in 1 year, which was pretty much, it's unprecedented. So now they're going to have that kind of standard jump, I guess you could call it at this point, of 1 year between the first Avengers movie and then the second one in this kind of saga. So you have the King Dynasty in May, early May 2025, and then we're going to have Secret Wars a year later. So that makes sense. Now the big thing, none of this really bothers me. Don't care that much about all this. The exciting part of this, the news that came out late last night, Warner Brothers, they were sniffing, they smelled blood in the water. And so they decided that they were going to move from November 17th of 2023, Dune Part 2, up 2 weeks to November 3rd, 2023, taking over that date previously occupied by Blade. And that was, released there earlier in the day. So I tweeted last night that we knew that Dune Part 2 was going to be releasing on the same day as the Hunger Games prequel film, November 17th. I suspected that Blade would be delayed, which it ended up being, and that if it was, either maybe that the Marvel studios would move a movie from their earlier slate back into that date, or perhaps Hunger Games could even move up to that date a couple of weeks. And actually, it was Dune that decided to move, which I think is going to be great as far as like its box office prospects, because as I said, there is a whole month or so between the preceding blockbuster. There's a couple horror movies in October, of course, towards the end, which I'm sure will do good business, but nothing that's costs $100 million to make. Craven comes out in early October, Craven the Hunter from Sony, with Aaron Taylor Johnson, and then there's that solid couple weeks between Dune Part 2 and then when the Hunger Games prequel comes out on the 17th, and then of course the Thanksgiving holiday follows that, so they will all get a boost from that holiday. I'm sure any November films. So I'm thinking that's going to be a pretty solid slate. They're going to have basically 2 full weeks of IMAX screens, Dolby screens, all that good stuff. So I'm very pleased with that, and it's still within that, of course, the award season, quote unquote, window where the festivals pretty much wrapped up by that time, at least as the major ones. And so like some of that hype will be dying down, and then Dune can kind of swoop in, and we'll see when the world premieres and stuff like that happen. But hey, two extra weeks of it getting bumped up, 2 less weeks we have to wait. So I'm very excited about that, obviously. And I can't wait to see. I mean, we're coming up on a year basically until the movie comes out, and I know they're still going to go film in the desert, so we'll be keeping an eye on that. We'll see if we get any updates or any news tidbits in the meantime, of course. But yeah, very, very happy to see that. And yeah, it's crazy. We knew that some of these dominoes would be tipping over here sooner or later with Marvel, especially, but nice to see we got some updates, and I'm sure that won't be the last that we'll get probably in the next couple months.
I'm curious, you made me think of this when you're talking about like what's going to be going on when this releases, but
yeah,
I know obviously with the first Dune movie, it had like festival releases before the wide release. With this being in November, I correct me if I'm wrong, this wouldn't be like a Venice Film Festival like world premiere and then waiting months to release it, because it worked out because it was October to like a September festival or something like that, right? Or is that still in play here?
Yeah, well, that's a great point, and something that I know people have talked about on Twitter and asked me about. Yeah, so like Venice and TIFF and that kind of thing, that'd be early September, and that worked because in the first movie it was coming out overseas around that same time in Europe and Asia and other places. So it worked well. Here, I don't suspect that they will have that same opportunity because, with all the VFX and whatnot, you're basically looking at 2 months early of a release date, which I don't see in it. And it's also my understanding that they're not going to do a staggered release in the same way that they did last time during the pandemic at the peak, and all those other like details with HBO Max, etc. I'm pretty sure this is going to be like one big global rollout within about a week of each other. So I don't think that's going to happen. And honestly, as cool as it is to see it at the festival, to have those big high profile red carpets and like the reactions coming out of the screenings and whatnot, which I love, of course. The first Dune movie, I felt like really needed that because it had to establish itself as like, this is an actual contender for Oscars. Like this is something people should go to the theater and see. The first movie after it released and made over $400 million, won 6 Oscars. They have already set that precedent, and so I don't think they need that same advantage that would be offered there. As cool as it would be. So I don't think that's going to happen. Could surprise us. They could somehow get it done that early, but I don't suspect while they're still filming the movie and they would be less than a year from doing the festivals. I don't really see that happening, but it will be interesting to keep an eye on and see like when we hear more about their release plans.
Well, we're excited. I'm sure you've got something queued up already for your November November 3rd, 2022 tweet
Oh,
about being
baby,
a
it's
year out, some sort of
drafting it
insane
up.
thread or tweet in the drafts. But we are counting down the days over here. One final piece of news before we get into some House of the Dragon talk. Johnny, we just talked about Dune. Now we're talking about the Batman. Your two obsessions in life, your two cinematic obsessions. The Penguin show that we all know has been coming for quite some time. We finally have some concrete news on it, other than the confirmation that it was happening, the casting of it. But give me the rundown. What are we looking at here with this series?
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. Of course, Colin Farrell has been promoting Banshees of Inisherin, doing a bunch of interviews and stuff, and he was able to share some details, whether they liked it or not, probably over at HBO. And some of the cooler points. Now, the series was announced and like officially confirmed as going forward in March after the Batman came out. And now, months later, we're finally getting some details. He said that it's probably going to be 6 to 8 hours, so we can assume that's hour-long episodes. We're looking at a limited series on HBO Max, 6 to 8 episodes there. And some of the other cool points he mentioned is that the setting of the movie is going to be about a week or so after the Batman ends. So, of course, at the end of the Batman, there's this like biblical flood that overtakes Gotham City. We see people wading through the waters, dogs, places are shut down, overrun. They say that there's martial law. Bruce Wayne mentions at the end the National Guard's being ordered in, all that type of stuff. So very curious to see how that affects the storyline, of course. And it does sound like it is going to affect it because Colin Farrell mentioned that he's read the first script of the show, the first episode script. He's going to be reading the next couple of scripts for the episodes 2 and 3 in the next week. But he said the opening scene or like opening shot of the show is basically on him and his feet as he's kind of trudging through the water, the flooded office of Falcone. And so his office after Falcone, of course, has been killed, and he's now there kind of ready to pick up the pieces and establish himself as a full-on crime lord. So that is really neat. And then the other key piece of information here that has me more excited than really anything else, I would say at this point, is the announcement, the news that the one of the executive producers on the show and the director of the first 2 episodes, is what we're hearing thus far, is Craig Zobel, who is the Emmy-nominated director of and another executive producer on Mayor of Easttown, which was also an HBO limited series that you and I both watched, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, huge fan.
That came out like spring of last year, I believe. It was fantastic, a great kind of crime mystery thriller almost, and to see and hear that he's going to be attached to doing basically almost a third potentially or a fourth maybe of the Penguin as far as directing duties and having some creative sway. I think that's very promising, very exciting. And I'm just glad to see HBO is actually taking this seriously, seeing this as a great opportunity to kind of, as you said, I love the Batman. They're taking this as an opportunity to build out that world, expand and flesh out the location, the characters, the themes, and kind of what that is all going to look like going forward in not only this show, but then other maybe potential shows, or of course the Batman sequel. And this is filming in early 2023. I believe it's going to be January or February. And it sounds like they're going to be trying to do it in New York City. So another great setting. Hopefully they'll get some cool locations and whatnot. So everything about this is music to my ears so far. Zach, what do you think? Your expectations for this?
No, I'm right there with you. Mayor of Easttown, Penguin is not going to be, at least as far as we expect, it's not going to be, that like detective crime serial killer kind of thing like the Batman was. But
yeah,
Mayor of Easttown, even though that it was much more in line with the Batman than what we think the Penguin will be, it's still like the crime underworld grittiness that I think fits perfectly with this Batman universe that Matt Reeves has created. So I think that's a perfect fit. Super excited about that. And I'm really excited about the timeline here of when this is happening. That's so fun to me that it's happening. This story will pick up literally so close to the ending of the movie. I know like previously, like a long time ago when this first speculation was happening about this show, it was like, okay, is this going to be a prequel show about the Penguin? Like, where is this going to fit into a timeline? Is it going to be something that like you have to watch before Batman 2 or something like that?
Yeah.
But it sounds like this is just going to be a really solid bridge, it seems, between 1 and 2. I would imagine that they'll make it where it's not, integral to your viewing experience for the second movie that you watch it, but I'm sure it'll set things up perfectly and really just enhance everything. And we're both people who will be watching this and dissecting it and then going into the second movie with all of that in mind. But no, I think this is really cool because it was very set up at the end that, okay, Penguin's taken over. This is his time. So we'll really get to see that and lead into a fully formed Penguin in the second movie, I would imagine. So this is all, like you said, music to my ears. Really excited to get this underway and use it as a bridge in the story, but also a bridge in our time as we wait for the second Batman film.
Yeah, because I mean, if they're filming, it's only 6 or 8 episodes, assuming they're filming early next year. I would say this is probably something we could expect to be released. I would say most optimistically late next year, although I don't see that happening. Probably sometime in 2024 then, and then perhaps we'll get the Batman maybe in 2025. That'd be about 3 years removed from the first film. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And of course, Matt Reeves is going to be involved. He's, I believe, an executive producer on the show. Colin Farrell, I think, even has a producer credit on it. So they'll have that consistency, creatively and with the vision and whatnot, while still doing its own thing. So HBO, I mean, they continue to just demolish. I feel like maybe demolish is a strong word, but like the competition and like with the quality and the breadth of like what they're creating. It's very, very impressive. And this is just another kind of gem in the crown for them. So hopefully at least. And speaking of gems and crowns over at HBO, maybe the prime jewel in the center there is House of the Dragon, especially at the moment. And episode 8, we have our reactions, we have our feelings, a lot of feelings, emotional feelings, I would say, for this one. And I'm ready to get into it, Zach. Let's lay it out.
Let's do it. The Lord of the Tides, episode 8 of 10 in this first season. 6 years later, with the Driftmark succession suddenly critical, Rhaenyra attempts to strike a bargain with Rhaenys. That's what it says on the HBO Max banner, when you're going to watch it. Very vague, does not give you nearly enough details as to what all this episode entails, because my goodness, what an episode. This was to set the stage, I don't know, for not casual fans in like a demeaning way, but people like us or people who aren't like us, dissecting everything, reading reviews like in the loop, someone who just like shows up on Sunday to watch it and enjoy it. They may not have had the same experience, but for us, like, we're seeing nonstop on social media, like, oh my God, this is the best episode of all time. This is like a top Game of Thrones episode of all time. There's a performance in here that will win every award. They're like nonstop praise, nonstop hype for this episode. So by the time 9 p.m. on Sunday rolled around, I was ready to ascend into heaven watching this episode. Like, this was the hype was unreal. And I think that this episode, for the most part, lived up to a lot of that hype. This was a lot. I'm trying to just like lay out thoughts before we dive into the specifics here. But no, masterclass performance from Patty Considine, who plays Viserys. Just absolute chef's kiss there. I was kind of curious what, going into it knowing like, oh, there's going to be one standout performance, I was kind of expecting it to be Aemond, like knowing the way that the story was going and how he had just had his coming out party as a child, and we're aging him up to this new actor that we'd seen a lot of buzz about. But glad to see that it was Viserys, to see Patty get some shine there. But what were your thoughts heading into this episode, watching it, reactions, all of that, before we get into the nitty gritty here?
Yeah, so similar to you, I saw those reactions. I saw people hyping it up. So my expectations, I mean, they were high after last week because of how good that episode was, and that's
also the thing, is like, I don't need people hyping up Game of Thrones, hyping up House of the Dragon to me. I know what to expect. I know, like, I know
Yeah.
the quality of this show. I don't need you to hype it up even more because I already go into it with super high expectations.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, my hype was high as it could be. And I will say, and yeah, I saw that, the mention of that performance. I'm like, who is this? Who is this possible? I mean, everyone's already so good every week. It's like, who's really gonna stand out? And it was interesting because I got about, and so I had these expectations. I had my idea of what the episode was going to be like or how it was going to go. And I would say my expectations were like really shattered in a lot of ways. Like it was amazing. And I genuinely think it was like masterful, basically beginning to end, but it was so very different from what I expected. And like I think a prime example of that was going into the episode, as we mentioned, there was that one performance that a lot of people have been hyping up. And saying, such praises. I was like, yeah, who could it be? You mentioned Amon. I was like, okay, yeah, I could definitely see that. And as the episode was playing out, I'm like, man, I can't wait to see like what this like fireball performance is gonna be like, or who it's gonna come from. And then the show continues, and we get to that scene where we're introduced to Viserys for the first time in the episode. And we see him, and I'm like, oh my God, like he is so ill and like so broken down and like deteriorating. And then, Patty Considine, who I've been a huge fan of throughout the season so far, I think he's just been spectacular in a lot of understated, like more nuanced ways than maybe some of the other characters or actors. He starts talking, he starts moving and everything. And by the end of that scene, I was like, we got to that scene. I'm like, wow, that was really, because I wasn't sure how much he was really going to be in this episode, because the name of the episode is The Lord of the Tides. So that led me to believe that, okay, maybe this is really going to be focused on the Valerians. Like we're going to be getting
Corlys, yeah.
Corlys, maybe he'll show up or something crazy is going to happen there. And then I'm like, but wow, I was like, well, that was really like startling and like moving in a lot of ways. Like I was ready to like tear up because he was just so like impressive. And then we get to the next scene with him where he is talking to Otto, and he is being like kind of dressed, and he's talking about having supper. And then it was like right towards the end of that scene, I was like, oh man, I was like, I think the performance people are talking about is him. I think it's in this episode, like Viserys this is probably going to be his last episode. And I'm thinking he's going to have a really impactful couple scenes maybe. And of course, like nothing prepared me at all, even thinking that at that point of the episode, that we were going to get what we got, which is a couple like truly special sequences. The first, of course, might be the episode, or not the episode, but the scene of not just the episode, but the entire season, of him entering the throne room unexpectedly. And then, of course, there is the later scene, the dinner scene, where he arranges to have everyone sit down with him, and he has kind of this last plea for them to reconcile and move forward like peacefully. I was like had chills like throughout the episode. I was like crying. I was like, oh my God, this like, it wasn't just that Viserys, like, who has been an interesting character, as I said, all season, was keeping me interested and keeping me on my toes, but just the work that Patty was doing was just something that I've not really seen very often. Like it was completely, utterly transformative. Everything from his physicality to his voice. Just thinking about our introduction to him, where he's laughing and peeling the egg in episode 1 to now, he's had a whole span of a life in this character, and I thought he just absolutely brought it home and knocked it out of the park. And I've been thinking about it all week. Like honestly, I really have not been able to stop thinking about his performance, and he is the highlight of the episode. And I think the episode is still great, even outside of that one role, of course.
For sure, it's fun because I got to watch this. I watched it obviously Sunday night in real time, and then Rebecca was working Sunday night, so I watched it back with her on I can't remember if it was Monday or Tuesday. But so I got to watch this episode twice and really appreciate the performance rather than just like taking it all in the first time, but really get to pay attention to the performance, the nuances, everything. Definitely echo everything you said, and it's been very cool to see the reception that this performance has gotten, and also how Patty Considine has reacted as well. Like he posted on his Instagram today like a thank you to the character. We've heard that that George R. R. Martin, the creator of Thrones, of the character, had reached out and said that this portrayal of the character was better than anything that he had ever written, that he wants to go back and rewrite the character to do it justice to this performance. And if the person who made this character is giving you that sort of feedback, I think that's pretty high praise. I don't think it gets much higher. But there were so many different layers to this character. Whether you loved him, hated him, there's no way that you could have ended up hating him after this performance, this episode, and everything that he echoes as he's basically giving his dying wishes, his last breaths. But in the Instagram post, he really broke it down, talking about how this is a love story, and that everything since Emma died, his original wife, that he was just in love with her, and that when she died, he died as well. And it was the start of a very slow decline over the years for him. But a ton of cool nuggets that have come out since this episode aired, hearing that the crown falling off and Daemon picking it up and placing it on his head, that was improvised, hearing that he improvised his dying words when he says "my love" and reaches out before the episode closes. Just a ton of really, really cool, interesting pieces that add even further to this performance and to this episode as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely worthwhile highlighting those particular moments, and the fact that they were pretty much like spontaneous, and were worked into the show so beautifully is very cool. And then also, the outside of the show, just the response, of course, to Patty's performance, George R. R. Martin's praise, and also the praise of people on Twitter, and just everyone kind of demanding that this man get some awards for this, because it is spectacular, and it's spectacular in a show that has been pretty spectacular at times, and not just as a show overall, but especially the performances, the acting from the entire cast. This was one that and I've seen it a couple of times now, and it's been great to kind of just notice some of the details and some of the things that kind of maybe can go over my head, like on the first go around. But there was a lot happening here, with Viserys, of course, Lord of the Tides. Ultimately, what that name of the title, why it's referenced as such, is this really is about the succession of the Valerians of Driftmark. And Vaemond, Corlys's brother, is basically saying, we know that these kids of Rhaenyra's are not actually my blood. They are not actually Valerians by birth, and so he's insistent on becoming the new lord if Corlys is to die or pass away, which his fate seems to be very much in question at the moment. He's been injured in a battle, or he's out in war in the Stepstones. He's already older, and he has this like illness now, so it's very, very interesting to see where that goes. I can't imagine he's actually dead, because I feel like whenever he does die, there's going to be I can't imagine that's someone you just kill off screen, right? Especially not due to at least sickness. Even if he dies of that sickness, I hope we get at least one more scene with him. So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on. But it really comes down to this whole petition that Vaemond, his brother, is doing to take over and to disinherit essentially these kids, Laenor's quote unquote kids. And Rhaenyra, of course, Daemon, they are very much insisting that, these are actually his children, that they have every right to a Driftmark. And of course, Rhaenyra also is kind of doing her own side petition to work with Rhaenys to accept, her and to work with her and to even marry Rhaenyra's children to Daemon's children, the children that are the daughters of Laena. Rhaenys, her two children are dead, but her grandchildren live on. At least the two daughters do. So there's that kind of back and forth, and then it culminates in this scene where Alicent and Otto, who are really kind of running the show now, are supposed to hear, and obviously it's not going to be a fair petition, it seems like, from Vaemond and Rhaenyra, and Vaemond makes a very convincing argument. I mean, one thing I've liked everyone talking about very openly and validly on Twitter and social media is he is right. He is
100%.
Everything he's saying is true. He has every right to feel the way he does, but he can't go about it in quite this way and hope to like accomplish anything. And maybe it's not fair, but I think that adds so much like flavor to the show because Vaemon is correct and he is right and he deserves what he is after, but we also empathize with as much as we empathize with his position, we do also with Rhaenyra, and like we are attached to her and we want to see her and her
Right.
family.
It's Team Rhaenyra. We're not letting anything happen to her.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, whereas even though all that's morally gray, I think that's what makes it so like conflicting and like enjoyable to like discuss and watch.
And to your point about him being right, like he almost got what he wanted. If it hadn't been for a heroic effort by Viserys to hear his daughter's plea, make his way to the throne and make his ruling, then Alicent and Otto would have basically overturned the claim and given him the throne of Driftmark. So poor guy, like you said, did not go about it the right way when he called her a whore and her children bastards. Because as again, in the small details that have come out from this show, while he's giving his speech, we see a very slight nod from Rhaenyra giving Daemon permission to do what he knows he's going to do. And he kept his tongue, lost the top of the dome, but what a shocking, jaw-dropping moment. I experienced it myself. I watched Rebecca experience it. This was so just startling and extremely I mean, like Thrones has never not been graphic, but I don't know if I'd ever expected something, or if there was ever anything that unexpected for me. To just kind of, we're in this like heated discussion, but then to have something so shocking and violent to happen like that. But Vaemon fucked around and found out, and that's that. But this kind of sets up the big. It's weird to say that there's a moment bigger than that in this episode, but the dinner sequence that we later get. You mentioned Viserys saying that he wanted to have supper. His whole family is here in the Red Keep, and he wants to host them and have everybody together one last time. As he mentions multiple times, he's not expecting to be around much longer, so he wants to make the most of this and also use it as an opportunity to make a plea to his family to cease their quarreling and instead come together, because as he said multiple times, I don't even remember the exact quote, but basically the House of the Dragon will not survive with all of this infighting between his wife and his daughter and their families. So we've got everybody here for dinner. It's like Thanksgiving, it's like Christmas, whatever, your family gathering. Viserys, Alicent, Rhaenyra, Daemon, Otto, all of the children, the grandchildren, and we're just having a good time. And it's almost, for like a slight moment, seems like this is like a happy ending, a peaceful moment in this constantly like absurd, shocking, brutal world. Because Viserys gives this plea saying that he's an old man, he doesn't have much left, these are the people that he loves most in the world, and he sees them fighting with each other, and they go around the table all toasting each other. Alicent and Rhaenyra make up. Alicent even acknowledges that Rhaenyra will be queen, but then the second that Viserys goes off to bed, all hell breaks loose, Johnny.
Yeah, I mean, I loved that scene at the dinner table where he is making that last plea and we get to see his face. I thought the effects were really great on his face. I thought it was quite shocking and effective. And just his, I mean, everything about the performance is spectacular, but just the way he does feel so genuine and like so desperate. He knows that, as he says, like he's going to die imminently, and he can't stand the thought that this is going to continue to be potentially violent conflict and people could die and the family could be torn apart because of these petty things in a lot of ways. So I thought that was great. And then of course the look, like before he's taken out, he gets lifted up in his chair and taken out because he starts to kind of have a bit of a fit. He is just staring, and like you get this kind of like little kind of montage across all the different people in the room and their faces, and like they're laughing and smiling and eating and just like enjoying the music, and he's just staring and like kind of looking at his grandchildren dancing, and he's like, or I guess it's technically his daughter and then his grandchild dancing. And so it's just like, wow, like, you know, he feels like maybe I did do it, like maybe I was able to pull this off. So I like that he was given like some semblance of peace or like some comfort at the end, even if it is not true. And then yeah, the hell breaks loose because literally as soon as he walks out, they bring a pig in, and or he's carried out, they carry in a pig, and it plops down in front of Amon. And Luke, the youngest kid of Rhaenyra's, or at least the youngest between him and Jace, he can't help but snicker and laugh at the fact that, you know, he used to make the pig jokes alongside the other kids at Amon's expense. And Amon does not like that too much. And so he slams his fist on the table, and then, of course, has this dramatic little toast accusing them of being bastards without being open about it, and without really, he tries to pass it off as a compliment, saying they're so strong. I thought that was really clever. And he is definitely going to be a firecracker of a character to keep an eye on. He looks so badass. He looks so cool. He's very imposing and menacing. He beats Kristen Cole, one of the best knights in the kingdoms, in a training session, and then he, you know, throws Jace, who is just as big, if not bigger than he is. He like throws him to the ground with one hand, basically. And so yeah, it's going to be interesting. And then he comes face to face with Daemon, and there's, you know, sparks between them, and I'm very curious to see what's going to happen long term with them. And seemingly on,
It's like
opposing points.
He wants to take him down, but he also admires him and has a crush on him at the same time. Like he's like, this is who everything that I want to be in life. When his reaction when he slices off Vaemon's head, like,
Yeah.
is not like a shock. It's like oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And then like the
Yeah.
standoff that they have at the end, like he envies his power and his brashness.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I totally agree. So, and then of course it wraps up with the denouement for Viserys screwing up things one last time, and unintentionally, of course. He meant well, but we have this Song of Ice and Fire prophecy trying to pass along details to Rhaenyra as he thinks he's about to pass away, and he is actually delivering information, bits and pieces that are misconstrued and misinterpreted by Alicent.
Intentionally misinterpreted, it seems
Yes,
like.
exactly. So Alicent just grabs those little scraps of logic she can use to maybe keep herself in a strong position, and her children in a strong position for the throne. And she says she's going to go ahead and do his bidding, but really it's just her trying to get Aegon and her family up in power. And then of course Viserys, with his last breath, there's that improvised moment. You know, he's saying no more, and then he says my love, like as he dies. And of course, probably talking about Aemma, we see a very close up shot of Emma's ring, on his finger still, which we've seen a couple other times throughout the show. And so it was just great. It was really touching, really emotional, and I thought fantastic final shot and final line for Patty in that role, and for this episode.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. This is one of my, I don't know if I would say top 3 all time, but definitely top 5, top 8, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Across Thrones and House of the Dragon. What an episode. Really setting the stage here for the last 2 as we finish up this season. And the season as a whole has just been so fantastic. I have no reason to expect that they won't stick the landing here.
Right.
But as long as they do, this will be right up there with, you know, like peak Game of Thrones. Like what a debut season, to so far not really have missed any sort of beats, no missteps for as far as I'm concerned. So really excited to see how this wraps up. I know it'll be interesting to see Thrones is so well known for like episode 9 shit popping off and then dealing with the fallout in 10. You know, like that's where like we had Ned Stark or a Battle of the Bastards or the Reigns of Castamere, all of these things. So I'm curious if House of the Dragon will do the same this coming week with a just absolutely wild episode 9 in the fallout. One of the things that's interesting is that this is now this is who we're working with moving forward. This was the final time jump. So the characters, the actors that we've just been talking about, you know, the super cool new version of Aemond, all of the children are now their adult selves. So we'll be sticking with those moving forward. A couple new players will be introduced, different children coming into the picture, but that's the stage is set for what we're gonna get with the last bit of this season and the seasons moving forward. I know George R.R. Martin had said this week that this is not like a confirmation on HBO's part or anything, but he has said as the author, like, in order to fully tell this story the way it needs to be told through the Dance of the Dragons, you'll need at least 4 seasons of 10 episodes each. So again, that's nothing official, but if it's coming from the creator, I think that's at least like a solid expectation for what we can get here. And we know that after Thrones and the complaints there, I would imagine they're doing everything they can to fully tell the story, to not rush anything moving forward here. But with all of that being said, as we wrap up our thoughts on this episode, Johnny, stock up, stock down, our favorite time of the week. Talk me through your thoughts here. Are we buying? Are we selling? Are we holding? What do we have here?
Well, I'm gonna continue to build up my position from last go around, which was buying stock in Aemond. I'm gonna double my position there actually, because he still has Vhagar. We didn't see Vhagar in this episode, but he is bigger, he's badder, he looks cooler. He's no longer a child. He is ready to kick some ass. And maybe he's not an experienced warrior at this point, but I'm sure he will get his opportunity. So, and if and when he does get his opportunity, I am not really too optimistic about anyone who is standing in his way. So I'm very curious to see what happens with him. I'm very confident though in his position for sure.
Yeah, we saw like you mentioned, the training session with Kristen Cole defeating him, and then the line that he does not care about tourneys. You know, all of the faux fighting of just going back, sparring back and forth, but instead he wants the real deal.
He wants
one, yeah. And as we've seen with his affinity for Daemon, he knows that that's someone who has experienced the real deal, and he wants to be like him. I think that's a solid buy there. The stock is definitely rising for Aemond. I'm gonna go with a sleeper pick here, but Mysaria. This is this first appearance since episode 4, so she's been on a nice little hiatus. But this was Daemon's former lover, whore, fake wife, whatever you want to call her. But the woman from the brothel that he had a thing with, that he took to Dragonstone, and unbeknownst to her said that she was his soon-to-be wife, that she was pregnant. And then when we last saw her in episode 4, there had been a time jump, and she was now, you know, to put it simply, the Lord Varys of this era, the whisperer, the master of whispers, who has all of these sources around. She was the one who told via one of her little birds, Otto Hightower, about Daemon and Rhaenyra in the brothel together. But now we see her potentially working on the other side of things. Again, first time we've seen her since episode 4. Towards the end of this episode, we see the servant that has been following around Alicent the whole time, during a moment that we didn't mention, but a little scandal in the castle as Prince Aegon had raped one of his attendants, one of his maids. And so Alicent had to confront her about that, give her some hush money, give her the same medicine that Rhaenyra had previously, basically like a medieval plan B. But the attendant, the maid that was helping Alicent with all of that, was reporting to Missaria at the end. So potentially giving some dirt on Aegon, some dirt on the High Towers, that family as a whole. Missaria, if she's anything like Varys, you know, he served the realm. He was not one side or the other. He wanted what was best for the realm. So we can only hope that she is in the same boat. Could be using some information against the green team and in favor of the black. So I think that just in general, the fact that she's coming back into the picture means that something's about to get stirred up. So I think she's a good one to put some stock in right now.
That's a good point. I don't know what her ceiling is because it's unclear. Like,
I don't think she's going to be a major player, you know, but she's going to be there stirring the pot.
She's a role player. Yeah, no, that's a great shout out. And then I think my other last shout out would be, you know, I gotta dump my Corlys stock, unfortunately. It doesn't look too good for the man at the moment. He is out in the middle of war and he's been mortally wounded and is sick and he's old. And like I said, I don't know if we're gonna see him again necessarily. I hope we do. But it's not looking good. And I think if we do see him again, I'm not sure if he's gonna have much influence or power or strength, really. So Corlys in general, his brother got knocked off. The House of Valerion in general is not looking too strong at the moment. We'll see what happens with the successors. But yeah, it's an interesting one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, Rhaenys had that line about the stranger visiting her, you know, whether it's both of her children, her brother-in-law, now her husband, just tough go for her.
Yeah, he's seen a lot.
I'm gonna break the fourth wall and go with a stock up for Paddy Considine as a whole. Stock down for Viserys since he's dead. But stock up for Paddy and his overall performance. We've praised it a lot, so I'm not gonna go into anything further here. But huge performance from him. Emmy season can't come soon enough. So huge stock up for him, but stock down for the character since he is no longer with us. But I'm with you. I'm going in with you on stock down for House Valeria, and we'll see if old Luke can pull them up by their bootstraps here if Corlys doesn't make it out. But any final thoughts on House of the Dragon episode 8 before we get into Smile?
No, I mean, I can't praise it enough, really. I think this is the best episode of the season thus far, and the bar has been set high. And as you mentioned, it's definitely one of the best episodes we've ever gotten in just the entire universe between this and Game of Thrones. And Paddy Considine one last time. I mean, just unbelievable, moving, powerful performance from him. And I hope, yeah, as everyone else has been saying online, get some awards buzz going. Hopefully we get something for him next year. And I'm definitely sad to see him go, but I think they did a great job setting everything up with him this season and paying it all off at the end.
Couldn't agree more. That is House of the Dragon, episode 8. 2 episodes left. We will be back next week to discuss the penultimate episode. But now, moving on to our review of Smile. So, let me lay it down for you. We've got a cast right here led by Sosie Bacon, Jesse Usher, Kyle Gallner, Robin Weigert, Caitlin Stacey, Cal Penn, and Rob Morgan. Not a ton of big players at least as far as I am concerned. There weren't a ton of people here that was like, oh, okay, this is like star power. This is why I'm coming to see the movie. Not trying to be disrespectful to anyone, but I think that's, unless these are like people in more in like the horror sphere that I am just unfamiliar with, but weren't like, you know, capital M movie stars necessarily. But that doesn't mean they can't turn in great performances, because they definitely did here. Rotten Tomatoes currently at a 78% critic score, 79% audience score, so pretty hand in hand there. And I'm doing you one better, 81 out of 100 for me. Johnny, where are you coming in here?
I'm coming in at around a 75. Very, very good experience with this one, I would say, overall.
Yeah, we are all in the same ballpark here. But quick plot synopsis. After witnessing a bizarre traumatic incident involving a patient, Dr. Rose Cotter starts experiencing frightening occurrences that she can't explain. As an overwhelming terror begins to take over her life, Rose must confront her troubling past in order to survive and escape her horrifying new reality. Very spooky, really, really, really scary stuff here. I mean, this was something that I didn't. I feel like we collectively, as a group, did not have very high expectations for this. As a group, meaning our group chat. It's September, it's October, it's the spooky season, and there's usually a lot of horror movies coming out, but not necessarily a ton of good horror movies. But this one, it got the buzz started. We got confirmation from Jake, who is our horror expert, that this movie was nuts. And not only was it nuts, but it was very good. I know obviously by our scores we're pretty aligned here, but for me at least, this was not necessarily anything that was like groundbreaking or revolutionary, but it was really, really good at what it does, because it was basically, we've seen this sort of, okay, something happens, you've got a week to live, there's someone racing to figure out how to break the curse, break the trend, whatever. Like for me, the very first scary movie that I watched as a child was The Ring. And that's basically like what this is. But instead of like a videotape that curses you and then you die 7 days later, like, okay, it's this chain of suicides. And you have to figure out how to break it. But I thought they did a nice job of like, even though that is something that like we're familiar with as a trope, it was a good job of like explaining it, setting it up, having that in sort of like investigation, realization, and then the twists of like, won't they be able to overcome this?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the most original concept, like flat out. I think we can all agree there for the most part. It does have shades of The Ring. I think that's the most obvious one that comes to mind with that, especially with that kind of several days. It's funny because in The Ring they're like 7 days, whatever the videotape says. In this, it's just several days, perhaps. Could be 4.
It's like, could be 4, could be 7, more or less. Like
there's some flexibility in there. But yeah, and it's also very much like a jump scare, which I'm not sure. I haven't really seen The Ring, or at least in a long time. I haven't had any reference to them, so not sure how much that relies on jump scares so much. I'd say that another like comparison I've seen that I think makes sense is It Follows, of course, has a similar kind of like something that's passed along basically, and like it could kill you, and you got to find a way to kind of get around it. And that's, it's a familiar trope, but I think it's one that is effective in a lot of ways, and I think they do interesting, like creative and newer things with it here. Maybe it's not always like, again, the most like thorough, like super fleshed out like ideas when it comes to some of the character types and that sort of thing, or all the different maybe a couple subplots that pop up throughout the movie. But I thought beginning to end, it was effectively kind of built things throughout, and especially in the last 10 minutes, I was very much scared and wanting to see what was going to happen or how it was going to end. And I walked out with a big old smile on my face, I would say.
I see what you did there.
So yeah, I can't complain too much. I thought it was effective and surprisingly good compared to my expectations, especially.
Yeah, I was very surprised, very pleased with this. And it's nice that you mentioned the jump scares, because that was something for me. Like, I know we've talked about it. I in general, like, jump scares will scare me. Like, there's no denying that. But I also have thought that it's like a cheaper scare. It's not necessarily like a Midsummer, a Hereditary, like those kind of like, where the ambiance is what's terrifying you, the theme, everything, like the overarching horror, rather than just like a quick, cheap, okay, we're gonna have something pop out at you and have like a visceral reaction, rather than like an all-encompassing sort of thing. But this does have a lot of jump scares, and they worked really well. Like for me, this did not, even though they were those jump scares, they all like felt, purposeful and well incorporated into the movie. It wasn't like, okay, something's happening, we're just gonna have something pop out, but just because we haven't scared you in 5 minutes. Like when it did happen, it served the plot. And they also did mix in, nothing to the level of a Hereditary or a Midsummer, but a lot of the other stuff as well. This kind of as we're tracking this chain, like, is it a demon, is it a spirit, is it a ghost, what is it? And we kind of deal with those things, and then also the, like, this thing feeds on trauma, so there is, like, to an extent, an exploration of like trauma and like natural horrors that are not monsters or suicide chains, but stuff that real people deal with, that is scary and dramatic. But no, this was definitely, all of that to say, like, the jump scares worked really well for me. And this was definitely the most scared that I have been in a theater in a long time.
Wow.
I went with one of my friends, and he wanted to see it but didn't want to go alone, so he like knew that I was the one who goes to see every movie, and was like, hey, when you go, let me know, we'll go together. And he was like, I think I've mentioned this before probably, but like, I'm like a face squeezer during these movies. Like, I don't cover my eyes, but I'm like hand on the chin, like squeezing the face, or like just like very tense. And I was super tense this whole time. He was like turning away from the screen during things. There's one particular jump scare. I won't say which one it is because I don't want to spoil it. If anybody is listening, I don't want to ruin that for you. But there was one that literally got me, and I like flailed. And then he was like, what happened? And I was like, wait, what do you mean what happened? He's like, I wasn't looking. So I had to explain to him what had happened. But I thought it was very scary. And then that, like you mentioned, that the last 15-20 minutes where it does kind of take this turn, was scary as well. I really thought that Sosie Bacon was, again, hadn't seen her in anything before, I don't think. I'm looking at it now, and it looks like she was in Mare of Easttown, but I can't think or recognize what she may have been in that. But
yeah,
no, she was a star. I thought she did really well here leading this movie, and fully committed to the fear, the terror, the just like gradual descent into madness. One thing that her performance, to an extent, and just also like the feel of this movie, kind of gave me Invisible Man vibes, which I know you did not like.
oh
But, similar like just decline in the
I
character.
see why you're saying that though. Yeah,
as like with the character itself, like as they're kind of like descending into madness. Elizabeth Moss doing it there, and then Sosie Bacon doing it here. I feel like they had a similar trajectory, but then also like some of the camera work reminded me of it, in the sense that, like, okay, we've got these like wide shots, and it works really well in Invisible Man because of the purpose of like, there's an invisible man, you don't know where he is, we're providing you with all of this space to look around for a curtain to move or something. Not necessarily the same effect here, but they did it anyway, like with wide shots with a stationary camera that just kind of like turns, which is just kind of like off-putting from what you normally see in a movie, and eerie. So it didn't work to that same extent, but I think it still added to the scares for me here. But yeah, I really like this. I thought it was way better than I expected. I had a lot of fun with it. And it was the perfect spooky season movie to carry on. I think I'm 8 movies deep in my spooky season watch list so far.
Yeah, I gotta catch up, man. I'm lacking big time. But yeah, I'm glad you liked it. I wasn't, I think the way the biggest, not like a disagreement, but like I think where we diverge a little bit, is that I wasn't that scared of the movie. Like, it didn't really scare me very much until, I would say, the last 15 minutes or so. And so in that regard, I think I'm trying to think of movies that really, some movies don't scare me very much. I would say even horror movies, like, I wouldn't say Pearl necessarily scared me, even though I loved it.
No.
As a horror movie is very different. So it's rare that a movie like really gets under my skin. But the last 15 minutes or so, I was really struggling to like not look away or like cover my eyes and stick to whatever was going to come next. So that's effective and definitely a credit to the movie. And I will say, speaking of the last 20 minutes or so, Jake kind of alluded to this when he first talked to us about it, was hyping it up. There are some like genuinely like amazing nightmarish imagery in this movie towards the end. It is very like, it's pretty impressive. Like I was not expecting them. Like when this happens, when you see it, you'll know it. And my very first thought was, oh, okay, like we're going there. Like you're doing that. And I'm like, wow, I applaud you for kind of not like thinking outside the box almost as far as like the imagery and kind of what would be possible. And especially let's say some like design elements and just visuals and like certain shots in the last sequence or so I thought was especially effective and haunting and scary. So yeah, I walked, that's why I walked out, I think, at the end feeling like, wow, okay, like they went there and I thought it was pretty well done. Not the most original thing, not the scariest thing in my opinion, but I think a solid horror movie directed very well. And I'm excited to see that director. I'm what's his name? It's Penn, I believe, is his last name.
Parker Finn.
Parker Finn. Yeah. Okay, so I'm combining his names there. Parker Finn. This is his first feature. I might have him on my ballot at the end of the year for best debut feature. Because I thought even with the script maybe not being the most original or the most impressive or fleshed out, he was very effective in his editing and his shot choices and movements and things like that. And I thought that direction goes a lot, especially in horror. And I'm excited to see kind of what his opportunities are next. So yeah, I'd give it a recommendation. I would say check it out. It's doing well at the box office, so it doesn't seem like it needs any extra help there necessarily. But yeah, worthwhile. Kind of. I guess this did end up coming out in October, I think. So worthwhile.
September 30th. So just missed
worthwhile.
the
September
October
30th, October Eve release. So yeah, I liked it. I was and I think one thing I'll mention is I hated the trailer for this movie, and not in a way where like, oh, I'm too scared, like I don't want to see it. Like I hated the trailer for this movie. I thought it made the movie look so bad, and I saw it for months and months and months at the theater, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to go see that. There's absolutely no way. And I put myself out there, and I liked it. It was actually worthwhile. So and the marketing team did well in other places. I think everyone
Oh
knows.
yeah.
So good stuff. And yeah, I'm glad we were mostly on the same page about this one.
There you have it. Smile. 81 from Zach, 75 from Johnny. Certified inside the film room stamp of approval. If you haven't seen it yet, add it to your spooky season watch list. We definitely would recommend it. And there you have it for our episode. What a time. 150 deep. Thank you to everyone who has been riding with us since episode 1. Thank you for getting us to episode 150. We could not do it without any of you.
Absolutely. Very, very excited about the future and where we've come, where we're going. Stick around for the next 150. And to keep up with everything and staying on track with that, follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, give us a like on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where we post all the episodes. And on those other socials, you can keep up with giveaways, promotions, all that good stuff. And those accounts can all be found at Inside Film Room.
And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, Amazon, iHeartRadio, anywhere you can get a podcast. We are there. And be sure to come back next week as we continue our House of the Dragon recaps and our spooky season themes, where we're going to break down Halloween Ends. We'll see you next time.